Hello and welcome to this episode of TraderTalk TV. My name is Lindsay Rowntree. I am COO at ExchangeWire, and today I am delighted to be joined by Jean-Baptiste Pettit, who is CTO at Greenbids. Welcome, Jean-Baptiste.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Today we're talking about, as the name of your company suggests, sustainability in advertising specifically. So before we kick off into that, let's get some intro into what Greenbids is and what your company does.
Yeah, well, in a few words, basically Greenbids is a one-year-old company, and what we try to do is enable everybody on the programmatic chain to buy their media in a more sustainable way. So we're not a measurement company, and we're not a carbon measurement company. We're a carbon sustainability optimization company. So we get everywhere we can in the programmatic chain. We try and reduce the waste, we try and reduce the carbon intensity, and we try to make the programmatic chain better in the way that we try to reduce the carbon that is wasted by buying media.
Interesting. So a carbon sustainability optimization company.
Exactly.
There'll be an acronym there somewhere. So CSO is coming
Probably
your way very soon. And so before we kick into kind of what Greenbids does and where you and how you fit into the supply chain, let's talk a bit about kind of what the challenge we currently have in digital advertising with regards to carbon footprint and sustainability more generally.
Yeah, so the first thing that we can talk about is how underestimated the carbon impact of the programmatic chain is. And these numbers are not from Greenbids. Great companies have opened up that are able to actually quantify the carbon that is emitted by the carbon companies. Scope 3 is one of them that everybody talks about. And the numbers are huge. For an average digital campaign, from the creative creation to the delivery to ad selection to impression to creative transfer, it's estimated that more than 50 tons, 71 tons of CO2 is emitted. So these are not small numbers. If you multiply that by the amount of spend globally that is inputted into the digital advertising, the numbers actually become huge. And they're we're sort of distracted by the automatization. And a number that I would really like to point out is, and again, it's a number that our friends and partners at Scope 3 provided us with, 60% of the emissions are linked to ad selection, not creative transfer, not the video. It's the process of selecting which ad to display at which time that is more than half of the CO2 emitted by the chain. And that's exactly what Greenbids is trying to tackle by optimizing how the selection process is done.
Wow. So let's get into it then. I'm fascinated to see kind of what you guys are doing to really help reduce that number, which is a number that people don't really think about, as like you said, as being the key cause of the issue. But let's see what happens and how you exist in the supply chain.
Sure. So
he's already warned us he's a terrible artist, so bear with us. But
so I didn't mention, but I'm the CTO of Greenbids, so it's important for CTOs not to be able to draw.
It's like doctors and handwriting.
Exactly. It's a credibility thing. So before I start drawing, and the drawing is not going to be a very brand new one, let me first start about explaining to you what Greenbids does the same way I explained to my parents what it does. And I have an analogy for that works actually pretty well, and it's the Lady and the Tramp. The famous scene where the Lady and the Tramp, they kiss over spaghetti. Now, if romance is what you're looking for, then the full plate of spaghetti makes perfect sense. If the kiss is what you're looking for, then only one spaghetti matters. All of the others are wasted, right? And that's basically how ad tech works and the programmatic chain works. You get one impression for every opportunity, if one impression, and all of the rest of the calls are basically wasted. So, looking at that, you might think in this: how do we reduce the number of spaghettis, and how do we identify the ones that are useful and useless? Right? And to follow up on the analogy, what is the spaghetti sauce, right? And the spaghetti sauce is CPU-intensive processes, the thing that makes the spaghetti slide together, right? And the more spaghettis you have, the more you need, right? So now the drawing I'm going to go for is the very simple one that everybody knows about. And
not spaghetti?
No.
Yeah. Shame.
In the beginning, there were placements, right? So websites. So I'm going to start from the right to the left because we're in England, so everything is inverted.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Interesting.
So you have a website, right? And this website has placements. So add units if you speak in pre-bid terms. So add unit 1. Add unit 2. And add units in the context of pre-bid, which is the case in most placements today, is basically an auction, right? So every add unit is connected to a number of SSPs, or to not necessarily SSPs, but they can be meta SSPs or aggregator of demand.
Yeah.
And so you get SSP1, SSP2, SSP3, and so on and so forth. And each add unit is connected to a number of those. The funny thing is they can be over-connected, and they usually are fully connected to a number of partners. They have some differences if they're video or display or native and stuff like that. But and each SSP, in turn, is connected to a number of DSPs. DSP1, DSP2, DSP3, and so on and so forth. And SSPs are usually connected to the same DSPs, but not always, because some SSPs have a demand that is very specific to them, and it's good, and some SSPs are connected to DSPs and the same. And the way what you see here is contrary to the analogy that I was giving before. The complexity of the chain, contrary to the spaghetti plate, is not linear. It's not just a number of spaghettis.
No.
Pre-bid auctions, SSPs, are multiplying factor of the complexity. So when you compute the total number of calls that are being emitted to choose the one impression that is going to get there, the number of SSPs partners connected to pre-bid auction needs to be multiplied by the number of DSPs connected to the SSP, and so on and so forth. And when you think about that, and I have numbers for tier 1 websites in France that you can buy inventory on them through more than 30,000 different ways. And the problem is that the 30,000 different ways are being activated almost at every auction, right? And only one wins. So 29,999 calls are useless, basically.
So it's 30,000 actions for one impression.
30,000 different ways are ending up winning in the impression, right? And I'm not even considering third-party data enrichment at every step of the way and stuff like that. So this is the problem. And the problem as well is that even for very large publishers, right, and I'm talking tier 1 global publishers, the participation rate of the different partners is actually low. You never ever see participation rate of SSPs on placements that are above 20-30%. And this number is a trick as well, because you have two ways of having an average 20% participation rate. Either you participate randomly in 20% of the auction, or you participate 100% of the time on 20% of the placement or context and 0% of the time on others.
Right.
And the end number is the same. And that's what Greenbid does. So now I'm going to get into the product, right?
Okay, exciting.
We have products everywhere in this chain. We have products. We started from the DSP side because some DSPs, and namely DV360, Xender, as well as TTD soon, where we are going to have a product. They provide a very amazing feature that is custom bidding or custom models. And what this feature does is a third party can get in the DSP and modify the way the bidder works to prioritize or deprioritize path in the chain, saying this impression I want it very, very much for reasons, and this impression, Not necessarily.
Yeah.
And it's not a blacklist or a whitelist. It's not a blacklist. It's not cutting things. It's prioritizing things or deprioritizing them, right? And starting from there, and the value that we provide to clients on the DSP side is saying, look, more than 40% of the carbon you're making in the chain is being wasted on impressions that don't have a high value, whether it's low attention, low viewability, a lot of intermediaries in the chain, stuff like that. And we're saying you can conciliate carbon reduction with performance, actually, because if you reinvest the wasted carbon, you can actually put that money into good impressions, and that's exactly what our models, they do on the DSP side. They have sort of a core of media performance with an outer layer of carbon modulation, saying like, we will make your performances better while reducing carbon. And for that, I don't know if I have a lot of time, but
no, go into it. Because I'm interested. I want to understand more.
I have a graph for that. That is on the DSP side. It's a very interesting graph, and it's the idea that performance and carbon are correlated, but not in a simple way. So if you look for very, very low CPMs or stuff like this, and you can be a bottom feeder, setting a fixed speed extremely low and try to get impressions whenever you can. Obviously, your CO2 is going to be extremely high because you're going to input a lot of information in the network for almost no value in the end, right? And on the contrary, you could have a very green setup where you have extremely high firewalls on the way you buy with high CPMs, filters on extremely high viewability website, maybe a very strict white list of websites that you want to buy for, and then you will be very low carbon, but the performance is going to be bad. And what we've hypothesized and we've verified across the campaigns that we've traded is that the correlation is actually this way. There is a tipping point somewhere in the way you do your bidding that is the best performance you can get for the best CO2. It's not a linear correlation, right? It's sort of there's a tipping point, there's an optimal point, and that's exactly what the algorithms at Greenbids, they do. The first thing is they provide the clients with where they are on this curve, because they don't know. You can't decide to move one way or the other on this curve if you don't know where you're starting. And the first thing that Greenbids does is saying you're here, right? And if you're here, so you're very low carbon, low performance, our algorithms are going to work as performance algorithm, and they're going to get you closer to here, closer to the tipping point, right? While keeping your carbon low, they're going to make your performance better. And so the product pays for itself. And if you're here, and they're going to keep your performance high and reduce your CO2. You're always, so the Greenbids algorithm, they do two things. They get you out of the curve, thanks to the machine learning models that we have. And they always get you towards the tipping point. And that means that if you activate Greenbids globally, basically you're sure on your global spend that on average you're going to improve performance. So Greenbids is a product that pays for itself, and you're going to reduce your CO2 impact. And so that is very important. And now, how do we say this path is a good path?
My next question is going to be like, okay,
Exactly.
so if I'm an advertiser, I want to understand how that is going to come about, because you're telling me that I can actually save money, reduce my carbon, and also maintain my performance or even improve my performance. I'm going to say, it doesn't make sense. How does that make sense?
And the idea is to take advantage of the fact that we're a pure third party. Like we're not involved in the chain as such. We are a third party that is able to have through the lens of carbon.
So you are ethereally kind of everywhere in the supply chain then. So whenever a bid request happening, something happening in the bid stream, you don't sit in one specific place in the bid stream, you're just kind of everywhere, floating around on top, just reducing carbon with every move you make.
Yeah, in a way you can say that, but there needs to be actual implementation.
Yeah,
right?
of course,
so
yeah.
the way we went about, as we started on the DSP side, to actually have sort of demand to, the idea is to get data from the actors in the chain, because some of them already actually have made huge efforts to reduce how much of a multiplying factor they are. And especially SSPs have algorithms that are called throttling algorithm or partner selection algorithms, and these algorithms are able to not contact every DSP all the time. They contact partner DSPs based on the probability that the DSP is going to have a bid for them.
Okay, so if I'm an SSP, I will look at DSP 1, 2, and 3, and I'll say, well, DSP 1, based on what kind of criteria? DSP 1 is more likely to go for this bid than DSP 2 and 3, so I won't put the bid request to them, just DSP 1. What kind of things are the SSP looking for?
Well, the area of features are SSP specific, but the main ones are the auction the auction context, like which device, because some DSPs are specialized in mobile demand, which country, which time of day, which browser, which user, because they have, of course, they have a cookie sync and stuff like this. So the feature IO is pretty vast, but
those kind of things actually weren't standardized before. So even going after saying, well, I know I want to target a mobile, but these DSPs are desktop only, so I won't go after them, actually was not happening before.
Well, I mean, the rate at which these throttling partner selection algorithms are implemented in SSPs is something of a mystery, right? Because
of course,
it's really hard to actually know the numbers, and that's exactly where I'm going for. Some SSPs, and I know because I've worked at TEEDS, I've worked at July, are actually pretty advanced, and they are able to filter out more than 50%, 70% of their outgoing traffic, while keeping 99% of the incoming bids. So it's very actually predictable which DSP is going to reply at what point. And so we go to SSPs with Greenbids, and we say to them, okay, you have put time and money and research into reducing your infrastructure load, right? Because for them, these projects were not born out of sustainability ideas. They were born out of cost reduction ideas. But the good thing with that tech is cost reduction is often linked to carbon reduction. So these projects, they get a second life, actually, now. And we go to them and we say, okay, share data with us of how many people you do actually contact for every ad call that you get. And these numbers are not confidential because they don't involve volume, they don't involve money. They just involve average number of people being contacted. So usually SSPs have no problem, and we will announce large partnerships with major SSPs across the world very soon. And they get a positive ROI from sharing their data because we take this data and we put it back into the models that are buying. So when an SSP is being extremely good at reducing his infrastructure load, when we get a bid request from them on the DSP side, we know that implicitly there's been a carbon reduction there because the multiplying factor was less than anybody else on average. And right now, for people that we don't know about, we're based on an initiative by AIB France and the SRI, where they got a lot of people together, SSPs, DSPs, publishers, and everybody on the chain, to agree on average numbers. So we use that. We use average numbers when we don't know about. And when people share the data, we actually use their data. And most of the time, the actual data is better than the average number. So we A/B test a campaign on the DSP side. On one branch, we put Greenbids. On the other branch, we put the normal buying algorithm of the DSP. And we provide the SSP with, look, by sharing your data, you actually had a positive ROI. You got that much more participation rate, higher average CPMs, and a bigger share of the cake. And this is just a reward because you work in a good, rational way, right? And for those who feel like they are left behind, for those who feel like they don't have the resources internally, and they exist still today, people that don't do any partner selection, we will, in the very near future, provide with the throttling as a service.
interesting.
throttling as a service product that will live on the SSP infrastructure and will be able to make these decisions so they can catch up to the market, basically. Because our goal is to enable everybody to do a better job and being rewarded for that, and a better job in terms of sustainability, because of course it's urgent. Right?
Absolutely.
And the last part of the puzzle, and maybe the most important one, is the placements. Because as I said before, and if you go back to the lady and the Trump thing, the pre-bid auction is like having several plates of spaghetti next to each other. And first of all, you trash 9 out of 10 of them. And then in the last one on the table, you need to choose the right spaghetti. So the number of SSPs and partners connected to the pre-bid auction has a huge impact on the multiplying factor in the chain, right? And some publishers, they've made enormous, they've spent enormous money and time to reduce the number of partners, to rationalize that. And we say to those ones, we say, we have a pre-bid module, and so it's open source, it's in the pre-bid library, and that is able to get data, fresh data, from how many partners you contact. Right?
Okay.
And this is a free product. We don't bill for data. We never ever bill for data sharing, because it's a win-win. We can make better decisions on the buy side, and they can get more money because they're a good player.
So it helps them rationalize which partners they work with, or even not even have to get rid of any.
No. So the first analytics module is just to know how many people they contact.
I see. Yeah.
Right. So we just get data. And this data is inputted back into the buying models. And same thing, if they feel like they want to do even more, we have another pre-bid module that is a throttling module. It's an RTD module for real-time data, so it sits just before the auction, the pre-bid auction, and it computes the probability of the different partners to actually have demand for that particular auction. And if the probability is too low, same thing as here, we simply don't send the ad call. And it's very easy to understand that the sooner you cut the link, the more compounded carbon savings you make in the chain, right? So the first results, and we've had great traction on this publisher product, because two huge French publishers have helped us get it started, like Prisma and Les Echos, Le Parisien, and we will soon have very good news from the US and the UK. We're able to cut from 30 to 50% of outgoing ad calls, while keeping 99.5% of the bids. So we don't, and something that is important is we don't judge the probability of winning, right? We want to keep a fair competition. We judge the probability of simply replying. What we want to do is cut the empty pipes, not the pipes that won't win. So that's something that is extremely important.
That's interesting.
And funny enough, this product is also very interesting to SSPs, because it costs a lot of money for SSPs to handle all of the useless ad calls. Right?
Yeah.
And so when you cut the useless ones here, they reduce their billing in infrastructure as well. And everybody wins. That's the idea of Greenbids. We want to be everywhere. We want to enable people to rationalize their infrastructure and the things that are inputting into the complex programmatic graph. And we want to help them be rewarded for that. Because once the publishers, they reduce the number of partners, we input again this data into the buying model. So they get more demand, they get more participation rate, they get higher CPMs, and so they win. And everybody wins. There's no loser in this product. That's the good thing.
Because my first thought was, well, actually, if throttling's happening here, whereby an SSP is using an algorithm, like with what you're doing with them, to work out actually which DSP is likely to actually accept the bid request, does there need to be better connection between these two parts? In fact, do we need to understand which of these SSPs will be able to get the right response from the DSP to make it work here? But actually, all you're doing is reducing emptiness and lack of noise in this part. So the two different parts of the bid stream don't need to actually be connected in any way from that regard, because this is just cutting out bits where nothing's happening and an ad call's going in and no one's replying. And then the second part is arguably maybe a slightly more complicated part of actually working out which DSP will accept the bid request in the first place.
Yeah, so we're looking at, everything is interconnected, and the actual probability of an SSP responding is dependent on the probability of the DSPs responding, of course. But we're choosing to take a sort of to assume independence, if I'm talking statistical terms, and look at the global probability of an SSP without trying to know whether the DSPs have a probability. So we take an SSP as a DSP in a way. And again, the participation rates, because SSPs are demand aggregators, right? The participation rates are still low. They're 20% or 15%, and that's in the best cases. So the demand matrix is actually very sparse. To speak about statistics again. Sorry. And
no, don't apologize.
We reduce the sparsity of the demand matrix everywhere. And by reducing it and by controlling which path we take, we actually provide with monetary reward for people that do the best job in the chain. And I think that is important because sustainability and carbon, they're quite new to how companies they think, right? There's no carbon market yet. You don't have a price for the ton of CO2. Well, but you have one, but it's not fully understood how it plays. But CPMs and participation rates and share of the demand cake, this is something everybody understands, right? So you'll notice that I don't speak about carbon that much. Right?
No, actually.
I speak about infrastructure. I speak about reducing waste. And this correlates perfectly with actual revenue. And everybody understands that. If you do a better job, you get more revenue.
Carbon reduction is almost a fortunate byproduct.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And this is why we're not measurers. So for instance, we're partners with Scope 3, right? And something important as well is like everybody, and especially the websites today, they're being judged by Scope 3 and others based on proxies like ads.txt and stuff like that. And we are in the process of working out with our partners, how do we actually share with them the data that we have on actual reduction numbers, like tangible numbers, like how many partners are being connected on the SSP side, on the publisher side, so that everybody can be judged, not from proxies, but actual data. And so there's more to win to implement Greenbids. On the long term, is that if you're in advance, that you're being judged at the, at face value of the work you've put in, then in the next few years, there's a huge market share that is going to come your way because people that are going to be late on the sustainability challenge, I think there are going to be probably big winners and big losers from the sustainability sort of wave that everybody needs to take into account now for very good reasons, actually.
Absolutely. And so from a publisher perspective, this actually changes. This can almost alter the way that they would optimize their demand path. They haven't got to look at, you mentioned, relying on kind of add.txt files. Actually, this helps them be able to not do that any further.
Well, they still, I have another analogy for that.
So many analogies.
And cutting a partner altogether and removing them from your ads.txt is basically removing a limb, right? And sometimes it's important. Sometimes you have to because it's really, really useless. And we're not saying that people should stop maintaining their ads.txt list. But what Greenbids provide is microsurgery.
Right? I like that,
And basically saying, okay, this partner overall is not extremely, it doesn't have a huge share of the demand that we get, but in certain cases, they get demand where nobody else has, right? So we don't want to remove them fully. How can we do that? Greenbids can do that because we can estimate the probabilities all the time, right?